Welcome to episode 4 of Podnutz. In this episode, we're going to talk about building your own system. Once again, we're joined here with Mike Petro from Petro Computer Solutions.
Hello there.
You can find Mike's website at www.callpetro.com. Mike's going to help us go over the best way to build a system and pretty much everything you need to know about building a system, component-wise, and what you're going to be using the system for. And we're just going to do a step-by-step here and hopefully help you learn the best way to build your own system for the cheapest amount of money and using the best parts that you can. Anything you want to add, Mike, before we start?
No, I mean, you just got to keep in mind that there's more than one way to build a machine. There's more than one way to go at it. We're going to just cover basically the general ins and outs of what parts to select, how you know what you need exactly to get up and running.
Right, and then you can see, hopefully we'll help you determine what parts are compatible with each other and what's the best fit for a certain motherboard or that type of thing. All right, well, let's start then. Mike, why would somebody even want to build their own machine in the first place? I mean, you could go to Best Buy and buy a machine already put together for a reasonable price.
Well, that's true, but the number one reason that I think is building a machine that you know what's inside. If you buy a Dell or a Gateway, you're getting a nice computer at a good price, but you don't know, what components the computer consists of. The number one reason that I would say build your own machine is because everything when you build your own computer is interchangeable and it's very modular. In other words, let's say I have a Dell. Now, there's some Dells, for example, that use proprietary power supplies. So if your power supply breaks, you have to go to Dell and order a new one. You can't just go to the computer store and then get one up, buy it, and be up and running in a short matter of time. You have to deal with customer service, wait for shipping times, and it's just a lot easier when you have a computer that's all interchangeable.
And you'll probably pay a lot more if you buy it through Dell, too.
Oh, absolutely.
I want to talk a little bit about the use that you're going to have with this computer. What are you going to use it for? Are you going to use it for games? Are you thinking about building a computer for business? Maybe you're into movies and you want to do a lot of video editing. You're going to want to pick your parts for your machine based on what you're going to be using the machine for, because gaming takes a lot of power. Video editing takes a lot of power. If you're just going to be writing Word documents all day, you could probably buy the cheapest components they have at the store. So first decide what you're going to be using your computer for. What's going to be your main purpose?
I mean, you just got to figure out what you're going to use, and keep in mind about the future. What you may be using it now for may not be what you're going to use it in a year for. Some people, get a new computer and then want to start playing games because they think it's so cool with their new screen and everything, and then they realize that they built a computer, for Excel spreadsheets and not to handle, heavy-duty, intensive games. So it's just something to think about, where you might be with the computer in a year's time, a couple years' time.
And then one more thing to keep in mind, I don't want this to be a downer, but the way technology is advancing, and especially in these late years here, you could buy a brand new computer, almost top of the line today, and maybe in 2 years, none of those components are going to be available anymore, or maybe not even compatible anymore. So, building or buying a computer, it's a tough decision because a lot of people would want to buy the best and highest components because they want their computer to last for 5 years. The truth of the matter is, you could buy the best processor you want now. In a year or two, it may not be still around. So,
right. And that's not so much as bad as it was a couple years ago. Like they would come out with twice the processing power than they did, a month before. Pretty much, you're just going to get you're fast, and it's just going to get faster. So,
right.
Even if you don't be worried about that the computer's going to be obsolete. I mean, I deal with customers that use Pentium 4 still, and they
right.
still have no problem getting around and doing what they need to do, and that's 6-year-old technology.
Right. Good point. First, let's talk about the motherboard first. For somebody who's building their first machine, Mike, doesn't know anything about motherboards, what advice can you give them?
Well, basically, motherboards are pretty standard. It's either, how much features you want packed on to the motherboard. You can get, your plain old motherboard that has all your components on board.
What kind of features are you talking about? Like what do some of the motherboards have that other ones don't?
Well, they're all going to have, anything you buy today is going to have like a Ethernet port so you can hook up into internet. Some optional things, whether you want onboard video or not. RAID setups, which is, a way that your hard disks mirror each other in case hard disk crash, you don't lose your data. You can get fancy onboard sound cards with the optical outputs or 7.1 surround built into the system.
You can get multiple motherboards with multiple RAM slots, so instead of having slots for 2 sticks, maybe you could put 4 sticks or even more than that.
Right. The amount of memory they can handle, what processor they can handle, what family of processor, whether they're Intel boards or AMD boards, the amount of expansion slots, like whether they have a PCI or PCI Express or, things like that.
Okay. How much should somebody spend on a motherboard?
Generally, you could probably get, if you're just like getting a bare bones that you're not really going to do a lot of hardcore stuff with. I mean, you can get nice boards for $60, $70, and then you can get nice boards with all those features packed, for $100, $200.
Like for gaming, if somebody's building a gaming machine, are they going to have to spend more for a motherboard? Are they going to buy a better motherboard for that, or?
I would say they would, just because that was going to have more RAM capabilities, better processors capabilities. Actually, the Intels, for example. All the Intel boards, most of them at least, they can handle anything from as low as like a Celeron D up into like a quad core. So they're all pretty much, the motherboard is probably the least of your problems. It's really, when you're selecting your motherboard, you look at a price. For my personal computer, I spent $129 on my motherboard, and I think it's great. 8 gigs of RAM, 6 SATA ports, things like that.
Sure. All right, that kind of leads right into the next question, which is what kind of processor should you get? Before we talk about processor speed, might as well talk about what brand of processor to get. Right now, there's the 2 main brands are AMD and Intel. I have my ear to the ground on this subject a little bit. If I had to make a decision right now on what kind of processor to get, I would go with the Intels, because the core processors, the Core 2 Duos and the quad cores really seem to jump ahead of the AMDs, and it seems to me like AMD is playing a little catch-up right now.
Right. Before it was like a Ford versus Chevy type of comparison, but I think I agree. All the systems I build are Intel. They're not going anywhere. They're leading the technology, and like Steve said, AMD is basically copycatting what Intel's doing and trying to play catch-up. So I think you can go with an Intel and be fine. I don't see anything wrong with it. You can also probably go with the AMD and be fine as well, but my personal preference is Intel.
Right. It might be negligible how much the difference is, but if you really want the top performance, then it's good to take note of what brand of processor. And by the way, I don't mind AMD playing catch up. I hope they do catch Intel, because I think it's because of AMD that we still have affordable